affirmative action initiatives? What about the future of voting rights? What about the future of pay equity and employment opportunities? What about the imprisonment of African Americans and the astonishing rate of incarcerations in this country?
You know, that's a curious thing. As many folks that are being killed in the streets by guns.
Exactly.
Everybody's afraid to say anything about trying to
the gun culture and how it is contributing to a culture of violence in our country, and particularly in the black community. We haven't heard much about that at all.
Not at all. And of course, what we're doing is getting ready for the second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. People back to work.
About personal attacks, you know.
And my God, hate. That's what it is. That's hate.
Hate.
Nothing but hate.
That's all it is, man.
I mean, you know.
And hopefully, I hope it doesn't discourage, and I'd like to deal with that in the last segment.
Okay.
To what extent this might discourage turnout?
I think it's going to promote turnout myself.
You do?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think that we're going to have the greatest, black folks going to get out and vote. I think, and I think all of the people who have felt disenfranchised
gonna get out and vote. Lord, and that benefits the Democratic Party.
Yeah, that will benefit the Democratic Party. I just don't see any place where folks are going to stay at home. I mean, this thing has gotten too hot.
Oh, yeah,
for folks. So you got to say something one way or the other. You know, that's what I told my son. I said, and my grandson, I said, now, y'all, you tell your folks y'all got to get out and vote. I don't care who you vote for.
But one other thing we need to deal with, I think, is to the extent to which the third party, the Libertarian Party, with Johnson, the extent to which he's ciphering off some black votes.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But I think Miss Clinton's going to win this thing. I'm sure. That's what all of the folks that I hear on television, MSNBC, CNN,
and Wall Street Journal, Huffington Post, they all show a victory.
And I'm just praying that. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Lewis Baldwin, and he's giving us some information in reference to African Americans and the election of 2016. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, let's during this last segment, let's take the opportunity to deal with some issues that you believe to be important in this election, so that we can sort of end this particular segment, given some directions in terms of what people can do and what we ought to do.
I think this election is important, first of all, because we need to assure the preservation of the Obama legacy. Obama has been very intentional about addressing health care issues, about addressing employment issues in the black community, criminal justice issue, the issues that pertain to law enforcement and its relationship to the black community. So we need to preserve his legacy in terms of pushing legislation that address the concerns for African Americans and women. We have to keep in mind that the Lilly Ledbetter law or act was signed by President Obama, which called for equal pay equity for women. So we first of all got to preserve his legacy for the black community, and I think that's very important for the black community. Another concern, of course, is how will this election cycle, and particularly the person who wins the office of president, how will that person address issues such as affirmative action, such as gun control, criminal justice, crime in black communities. I think that is very, very important. We look to the future, black Americans do. We've always looked to the future because we have had problems dealing with the past in many cases,
right, and
dealing with the present. We look to a future with hope.
Things have to get better.
Yeah, things have to get better, so we have a more hopeful view when it comes to the future. And I think black Americans today are looking for someone who will build on the Obama legacy. And I think most black American studies show that 87% of blacks at least will vote for the Democratic candidate. And I think that most black Americans feel that the Democratic candidate, who happens to be Hillary Clinton, represents a better prospects, a better choice for the future in terms of how our own platform in the black community will be advanced, not only in terms of the preservation of the Obama legacy, but building on that legacy in terms of what? Creating more jobs. There's unemployment in certain black communities at 58%. So how will the future president address those kinds of issues? How will the future president address the gun issue? Hillary Clinton has talked about gun control. Donald Trump has talked about the Second Amendment rights and how to extend those rights. So I think, you know, we have to look at that because that's very, very important, because crime, particularly black on black crime, has reached epidemic proportions in places like Chicago and New Orleans and Philadelphia. So we have to be very concerned about the candidate who wins and how that candidate will promote our agenda as it relates not only to education and jobs
and the Supreme Court
very important.
Yes, very important.
Pay equity, voting rights, affirmative action. I think these are the concerns that black people bring to the ballot as they vote for our president on November 8th.
And I think over the last 5 minutes, Dr. Baldwin, I think that this is an opportunity for black folks and other folks who feel that they've been discriminated against.
Disenfranchised.
That's right. This is an opportunity for them to move forward.
Exactly.
And the best way to move forward is to have a good agenda.
Exactly.
And I think that the Democrats do at least have somewhat of an agenda. I mean, at least it might be on the web page somewhere, but at least it's out there somewhere, and it's not a bunch of well, anyway, I mean, I think it characterizes itself when you talk about the opposite of that.
We have to keep in mind now that since the mid-60s, when Martin Luther King Jr. was imprisoned at Reedville, it was actually 1961-62, blacks have shifted more toward the Democratic Party. And they've shifted more toward the Democratic Party because they perceive the Democratic Party as being more in line with the kinds of concerns that they have, particularly as they relate to civil rights, affirmative action, the right to vote, etc. So I think most black Americans will, in this election cycle, support the Democratic ticket to the tune of at least 87%. If you look at President Obama in 2008, he got 93% of the black vote. In 2012, he got 95%. I don't think that the Democratic candidate would reach that. But I think the Democratic candidate will at least receive 85 to 87% of the black vote.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very, very important statistic because it indicates that we can be very, very optimistic in terms. And I do believe, I know people have been somewhat pessimistic in reference to the participation of Africans in this particular election, but I feel a shutout coming up.
Exactly.
You know, and sometimes I wake up at night in cold sweat, thinking that perhaps I might have to start looking for a Canadian route somewhere.
Exactly.
No, but seriously, I think that it is a real problem in terms of how we perceive ourselves and the threats.
Yes, but so much is happening in terms of trying to discourage turnout. We see that I think on both sides to some extent, and particularly on the Republican side. This whole idea that the election will be rigged.
Yes.
And I personally don't subscribe to that thinking.
I don't think many people.
Yeah, I think
we
have in the United States, in this country, one of the most sophisticated systems of voting, electoral politics, and I think that there's a lot of integrity there. So I don't subscribe to the arguments of those who think that the election will be rigged. But I do think that people of all races, of all ethnic backgrounds, nationalities, religious backgrounds will go to the polls and will vote their conscience. So I expect a lot of integrity as it relates to the electoral process.
I don't expect anybody's going to be trying to cast 2 votes.
Exactly.
I often say that it's hard to get many of us to cast 1 vote.
Exactly.
I doubt very seriously you're going to get anybody to cast 2 votes. Go down there twice.
Yes, I think
that's it. So
I think it would be an election characterized by integrity, and I think that this process in America, in our country, has more integrity than in other parts of the world.
That's it. And if we don't have it, then how could we expect it to be anywhere else?
Exactly.
And in spite of what everybody say, this is indeed the greatest country in the world.
Absolutely.
And I feel it a privilege personally to be an American. I mean, I've never seen anything that we've done or whatever that would put me outside of being a citizen of the United States of America, in spite of all of the trials and tribulations that we've had in this country. I think that this is the best one for us.
There's one thing we can claim, of course, is that our struggle has been toward the realization of participatory democracy.
That's right.
And we've been on that course.
Yes, and I think we'll make it.
Exactly.
I think we'll be very successful.
Exactly.
And so, Dr. Baldwin, during the last 45 seconds, let me thank you for bringing by again some excellent information, some encouraging statements in terms of where we are and some of the possibilities. While we stand on the very, very edge of this 3rd debate, I do believe that this will be decisive in terms of helping us move toward the polls.
Yes,
and I look forward to that, and I know that I've talked to everybody in reference to it, and so a lot of folks are going to vote. I'm convinced of that.
That's the important thing. We have to have the turnout.
That's the turnout, regardless of who
we have to make sure that the realization of our vision for the future.
Okay, and let me thank you, and let me encourage our audience